My own parents helped my 28-year-old brother try to steal $40,000 from my bank account. I'm a 31-year-old software engineer. I spent 3 years saving every overtime dollar, living in a studio apartment, eating ramen, and building financial security, while my unemployed brother remained the family's golden child. When he demanded I hand over my savings to cover his gambling debt, I said no. That was when my parents decided the solution was bank fraud. The call came from Wells Fargo's fraud department at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. Someone had tried to transfer $40,000 from my savings account to an external account using my online banking credentials. The security questions were answered perfectly. My mother's maiden name, my first pet, my childhood address. Information only 3 people in the world had ever known. The attempted transfer was initiated by someone named Jason Rodriguez, the security specialist said carefully. Do you know this person? I did. Jason was my brother. The same person who'd been calling me selfish for weeks because I refused to rescue him from another financial disaster. What the bank didn't know was that my parents had been pressuring me daily with guilt trips about family loyalty and how family helps family. I hadn't realized yet how literally they meant it. What none of them realized was that every threatening text, every guilt-filled voicemail, every manipulation attempt had been automatically backing up to my cloud storage. And when you cross the line from emotional pressure into someone's financial security, documentation stops being optional. The fraud attempt was just the beginning. Let me explain how we got to the point where my parents thought bank fraud was an acceptable family solution. Jason has been the golden child since birth. He's 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he could walk, he could do no wrong. Failed his senior year? The teachers were unfair. Got fired from his 3rd job in 6 months? His boss was unreasonable. Crashed 2 cars by 25? Just bad luck. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. The one who got good grades, went to college, and built a career. But in my family's eyes, success wasn't something to celebrate. It was something to share. When Jason dropped out of community college, I was expected to understand and help with his car payments. When he got evicted, I was supposed to see it as temporary and cover his rent. When he racked up credit card debt, family loyalty meant bailing him out without questions. The pattern was always the same. Jason would create a crisis, my parents would panic, and somehow I became the solution to problems I didn't create. By the time I turned 31, I'd built something I was proud of. Software engineering paid well, and I'd been disciplined about saving. My checking account covered my monthly expenses. My savings account held $40,000, money I'd earned through years of 60-hour weeks and living far below my means. That savings account represented security. It meant I could handle emergencies without asking anyone for help. It meant I could finally breathe without waiting for the next family crisis. To me, that money was independence. To my family, that money was Jason's safety net. Over the years, I'd probably given them around $15,000 in temporary loans that were never repaid. Car repairs, rent deposits, fines, and financial messes Jason swore he'd fix himself. Each time I told myself it was the last time. Each time, I was wrong. The requests kept getting bigger and more frequent. 500 here, 2,000 there, always urgent, always temporary, always framed as a family obligation rather than a choice. But $40,000 wasn't a loan request. It was a demand for my entire financial future. And when I finally said no, they decided I didn't get a choice in the matter. The call came on a Thursday evening. Jason's voice was shaky, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. I need $40,000, he said without preamble. By Friday. No hello, no context, just a demand for my entire savings account. Jason, what are you talking about? I messed up, he said quickly. Gambling, online poker, sports betting. I owe people 40 grand and they want it by tomorrow night. My stomach dropped. This wasn't another eviction notice or credit card bill. This was the kind of debt that came with consequences I didn't want to imagine. What happens if you don't pay? There was a pause. They made it clear that wasn't an option. I sat in my kitchen staring at the budget spreadsheet open on my laptop, the same one that showed my savings account as the foundation of everything I'd built. Jason, I can't give you $40,000, I said. That's my entire emergency fund. Emergency fund? His tone shifted, our desperation hardening into anger. This is an emergency, I'm your brother. And you're asking me to erase 3 years of savings for gambling debts. So you're just going to let something happen to me? The manipulation was immediate and familiar. Jason had always been good at turning his choices into other people's moral failures. "I'm not letting anything happen to you," I said. "You did this to yourself." He hung up. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Dad. "Your brother needs help," he said, skipping any greeting. "Family helps family. He's asking for $40,000 to cover gambling debts," I said. "Money you have sitting in a bank account doing nothing." Doing nothing. 3 years of discipline, overtime, and sacrifice reduced to spare change. That money is my financial security. "And Jason is family," Dad said flatly. "You're being selfish." There it was, the word that had ended every argument in our family for as long as I could remember. Selfish. I said no anyway. And that was when the pressure stopped sounding like guilt and started feeling like something else entirely. By Friday morning, the calls had become relentless. Mom called at 7 a.m. "Your brother is in real trouble," she said, her voice tight with worry. "These aren't the kind of people who negotiate." "Then maybe he shouldn't have borrowed money from them." "So, how can you be so cold?" she snapped. "He's your brother. Family helps family." There it was again, the phrase that had justified every bad decision Jason had ever made. "I've helped him before," I said. "I've given him thousands of dollars over the years." "This is different," Mom said. "This is life and death." "And it's $40,000, I said. "My entire savings. Money isn't more important than family." Apparently, family also wasn't more important than enabling Jason's gambling addiction. Dad called an hour later with the same script, then my aunt, then my cousin. One after another, the family network activated, all pushing toward the same outcome. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Jason's crisis, my selfishness, family loyalty, the expectation that I would sacrifice my financial security to clean up another mess I didn't create. Mom told me I'd changed since getting my promotion, like success had somehow made me heartless. The irony wasn't lost on me. The discipline they'd dismissed for years was suddenly the solution to their emergency and my moral failure. By Saturday, Jason started calling me directly again. This time, the desperation had sharpened into something more unsettling. "I've been thinking," he said. "You've got more than 40 grand saved, right? Between checking and savings?" "Jason, we've been over this. Just hear me out. What if I only took what I need?" he said quickly. "Borrowed it. Temporarily, I could pay you back once I figure things out." The word borrowed did a lot of work in that sentence. The answer is still no. "You don't understand what these people are like," he said. For the first time, real fear cracked through his voice. "They're not going to wait. Then you need another solution." "There is no other solution," he said. "You're my only option." That wasn't responsibility, it was leverage. He told me the kind of people he owed don't negotiate. And I was starting to realize my family didn't either. By Sunday evening, the pressure turned sharper. Dad's text was short and direct. "You'll regret abandoning family when you need us." Mom followed with a voicemail about how I'd broken Jason's heart and destroyed the family's trust. But it was Jason's last text that night that crossed a line I didn't know existed. "I hope you can live with yourself when something happens to me. Blood is supposed to mean something." I stared at my phone. The golden child who had been shielded from consequences his entire life was now using fear as a weapon. Dad said I'd regret abandoning family. I didn't realize yet how far they were willing to go to make sure I did. Tuesday morning at exactly 6:30 a.m., I found out how far my family was willing to go. My phone rang with an unknown number. Half asleep, I almost let it go to voicemail. I remember staring at the screen, annoyed, until something in my chest tightened and I answered. "Miss Rodriguez, this is Sarah from Wells Fargo Fraud Prevention. We need to speak with you about suspicious activity on your account." I was fully awake before she finished the sentence. "What kind of activity?" "At 2:47 this morning, someone attempted to transfer $40,000 from your savings account," she said calmly. "Our system flagged the transaction and blocked it." $40,000. My entire safety net. For a split second, I just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to process what she'd said. This wasn't another manipulative phone call. This wasn't guilt or pressure. Someone had actually tried to take my money while I was asleep. "The login used your correct username and password," Sarah continued. "However, the security verification triggered alerts. The answers to your mother's maiden name, your first pet's name, and the city where you were born were all entered correctly." I sat up in bed. Those weren't things you guessed. Those were things you learned at a dinner table. "Who was the transfer going to?" I asked. There was a brief pause. An external account under the name Jason Rodriguez. Hearing my brother's name attached to what was essentially a theft attempt made my stomach twist. Someone hadn't just tried to access my account, they'd tried to empty it. Someone had tried to move my entire savings into Jason's hands. And they'd done it using information only 3 people in the world had ever known. Miss Rodriguez, Sarah asked carefully, do you know anyone who might have access to this personal information? I did. Only my parents knew those security answers, the same parents who had spent the last 4 days calling me selfish, the same parents who kept repeating family helps family as if it justified everything. The realization hit slowly, then all at once. This wasn't Jason acting alone. They hadn't just encouraged him to ask me for money. They'd helped him try to take it. After I hung up with the bank, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone on the counter. The same phone that had been lighting up with calls, texts, and voicemails all weekend. The same phone that had quietly saved every message without me thinking about it. I'd been treating this like a family disagreement, a fight about money and boundaries, something messy but private. It wasn't. This was bank fraud. And if my family was willing to cross that line, then pretending this was just family drama was no longer an option. I opened my recording app and set my phone face down on the table. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done being unprepared. I called Jason that afternoon with a plan. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him, keeping my voice steady. About the people you owe money to. Maybe we should talk in person. There was a pause on the line, then a rush of relief. Really? You're willing to help? I want to understand the situation better, I said, face to face. Can we meet at your apartment tonight? Mom and Dad should be there too since they're so concerned. Yes, of course, he said quickly. They've been worried sick. I believed him, especially after their attempt to move my money had failed. That evening, I sat in my car outside Jason's apartment building longer than I needed to. I checked my phone one more time, recording app on, battery full, cloud backup active, everything saving automatically, just like it always did. I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to convince anyone of anything. I was there to let them talk. Jason's apartment smelled faintly of stale coffee and takeout containers. The living room was cramped, barely big enough for the secondhand couch my parents were sitting on. They looked tense but determined, like they'd rehearsed this conversation. Jason paced near the window, running his hands through his hair, unable to sit still. Thank you for coming, Mom said as I sat down across from them. We really need to talk about helping Jason. Actually, I said, placing my phone face down on the coffee table between us. We need to talk about the bank transfer attempt. The air in the room shifted immediately. Dad straightened in his seat. What are you talking about? Tuesday morning, I said. At 2:47 a.m., someone tried to transfer $40,000 from my savings account into Jason's account. Jason froze. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost impressive. I don't know anything about that, he said. Really? I asked calmly. Because the transfer was set up in your name. Mom leaned forward. Maybe someone stole your information. That happens all the time. Someone did steal it, I said. They knew my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name, where I was born. I let the silence stretch. Information only 3 people in this room have ever known. No one spoke. Jason stopped pacing. Mom looked down at her hands. Dad finally broke this silence. Look, he said, lowering his voice. We just gave him the information he needed. Jason was desperate. There it was. Not panic, not denial, just justification. You gave him my security answers, I said. We didn't think it was a big deal, Mom said quickly. You have the money just sitting there. Jason needed help. So you helped him access my bank account. Dad nodded once. We helped family. That's what family does. Even now, even hearing themselves out loud, they didn't sound ashamed. They sounded convinced. And if it didn't work? I asked. Dad didn't hesitate. If it meant helping Jason, we'd try again. That was the moment something finally clicked into place for me. I reached forward, picked up my phone, and stopped the recording. Good to know, I said. The next morning, I sat alone at my kitchen table. I laid everything out in front of me. The bank's fraud alert, screenshots of every threatening text, saved voicemails, and the 47-minute recording from Jason's apartment. Listening back, I'd heard it clearly. Not anger, not desperation. Entitlement. This had never been about money. It was about what my family believed they were allowed to take. And I was done protecting them from what they'd admitted themselves. I spent the rest of that week thinking about what came next. The evidence was undeniable. I had everything documented: bank alerts, messages, and a recording so clean you could hear Mom's nervous laugh when she explained how giving Jason my security answers wasn't a big deal. But having proof was one thing, deciding what to do with it was another. I could hand everything over to the bank and let their investigation move forward. The fraud department was already involved, and the recording would only make their job easier. Consequences would follow, and they wouldn't be light. But every time I imagined doing that quietly, I saw the same outcome I'd lived with for years. Jason would still be the victim, my parents would still control the narrative, and I would still be the selfish sister who took things too far. What I wanted wasn't punishment, it was clarity. My extended family had grown up hearing one version of the story: Jason struggling, my parents doing their best, me being difficult, distant, unwilling to help. Every holiday came with updates on his latest crisis and subtle reminders that I could do more if I really cared about family. They had never heard the full story. I opened Facebook and started typing a post, then stopped, deleted it, started again. My cursor blinked on the screen while I imagined the fallout. I knew exactly what would happen once this was public. Some relatives would thank me for finally telling the truth. Others would say I'd embarrassed my parents. A few would accuse me of tearing the family apart instead of handling it privately. I would be called dramatic, vindictive, disloyal. I'd been called worse before. For years, I'd protected my parents' reputation by staying quiet. I let them frame me as the sister with money but no loyalty. I sat through family gatherings where my values were questioned while Jason's behavior was excused. I absorbed the criticism because it seemed easier than correcting everyone. Protecting them had cost me more than money. It had cost me my voice. By Saturday evening, everything was ready. The audio file was uploaded, screenshots were arranged in order, bank documents were scanned. I built a timeline that showed exactly how Jason's request turned into an attempted transfer at 2:47 a.m. I listened to the recording again, alone. Dad saying they'd do it again if they had to. Mom explaining how my money wasn't being used anyway. Jason sitting there nodding as if this was all reasonable. That was when I realized something. If I stayed quiet after hearing that, I wasn't protecting my family. I was protecting a lie. Late Sunday morning, I finalized the post. Clean, factual, no insults, no emotional language, just the evidence, the timeline, and their own words. Family helps family, I wrote at the end. But bank fraud helps no one. I hovered over the button longer than I expected to. Once this was out there, I wouldn't be able to take it back. But I also knew this. There was no version of my life where I could unknow what they'd admitted. I clicked post. Within 30 minutes, my phone started buzzing nonstop. The post was simple, a timeline of events starting with Jason's Thursday night request and ending with Tuesday morning's bank fraud attempt. Screenshots of the threatening texts, bank documentation of the blocked transfer, and a 47-minute audio clip titled Family Meeting, March 15th. I'd tagged my immediate family and let Facebook's algorithm handle the rest. The first comment came from my cousin Maria. "Holy shit, I'm listening to this right now." Then my uncle, "I can't believe what I'm hearing." Within the first hour, the post had been shared 12 times. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years were commenting, messaging, calling. The audio clip was making rounds in group chats I wasn't even part of. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Sarah, my dad's sister. "I just heard the recording," she said without preamble. "Are you kidding me? They actually said they'd do it again? You heard it yourself. I'm calling your father right now. This is insane." She hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "How could you embarrass the family like this? Not, how could you expose our bank fraud? How could I embarrass them?" The family group chat exploded, relatives taking sides, asking questions, sharing opinions I'd never heard before. Apparently, a lot of people had noticed Jason's pattern over the years. They'd just been too polite to say anything. My cousin David wrote, "Finally someone said it. We've all been watching this train wreck for years." Uncle Jim added, $40,000 for gambling? Are they out of their minds? Even relatives I barely knew were weighing in. Apparently, everyone had stories about Jason's financial disasters that they'd kept to themselves out of family politeness. The audio clip went viral within our extended family network. People were sending it to relatives who weren't even on Facebook. Family friends were getting forwarded copies. My parents' neighbors were hearing about it. By evening, my parents were in full damage control mode. Mom posted her own Facebook status. There are always two sides to every story. We're disappointed that private family matters have been made public during a difficult time. Dad commented on my post directly. This is a private family issue that should have been handled internally. Very disappointed in how this has been presented. They were trying to reframe this as a privacy violation instead of a bank fraud admission. It didn't work. My cousin Lisa responded immediately. There's no other side to attempted bank fraud. Uncle Paul added, we all heard the recording. You said you'd do it again. The comments kept coming. People weren't buying the damage control. They'd heard my parents' voices on the recording. There was no spinning their own words. Jason tried a different approach. He posted a long status about family betrayal and personal struggles being weaponized. He painted himself as someone dealing with addiction who'd made mistakes but was trying to get help. He talked about feeling attacked and abandoned by his sister during his darkest hour. What he didn't mention was the bank fraud, or the threats, or the security questions. The response was immediate and brutal. Maria commented, "You tried to steal $40,000 from your sister at 2 a.m. Stop." David added, "Addiction doesn't excuse bank fraud." Even family friends started weighing in. "We heard the recording, Jason. You can't spin this." By the end of the day, Jason had deleted his post entirely. The family WhatsApp group, which had been active for years, went completely silent. No one knew what to say anymore. But the individual messages kept coming. Relatives thanking me for finally telling the truth. Apologies from people who'd believed my parents' version of events for years. Questions about why I'd never said anything before. The golden child narrative that had protected Jason his entire life crumbled in a single day. And for the first time in years, people were asking the right questions. Not why I wouldn't help, but why they'd expected me to. 3 weeks later, the bank's investigation wrapped up the way I'd expected. Wells Fargo's fraud department had everything. The attempted transfer, the security breach, and a recording of my family openly admitting they'd provided Jason with my banking security information. The matter was escalated beyond the bank, and lawyers got involved quickly. Jason didn't get another quiet bailout this time. Charges were filed related to the attempted transfer and misuse of my identity. My parents were implicated for providing the security information. Suddenly, the family's focus shifted from Jason's gambling debts to legal consultations and defense costs. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd crossed into criminal territory to protect Jason from consequences. Now consequences were unavoidable and shared. My parents hired an attorney who advised them to cut contact with me during the investigation. The daily calls stopped, the guilt text disappeared, the pressure campaign ended overnight. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent. The silence was beautiful. I changed every password I owned, updated my security questions with answers no one else could guess, added extra protection to every account. My money and my life finally felt secure. 6 months later, I attended my cousin's wedding. It was the first large family event since everything had come out. People approached me throughout the night, not to lecture me, not to ask for help, but to apologize. "We should have seen it," one aunt admitted. "We just believed their version for so long." Others shared their own stories about Jason. Loans that were never repaid, promises that quietly evaporated, patterns everyone had noticed but never felt comfortable naming out loud. The golden child shield that had protected him for decades was gone. On the drive home, I noticed something else had disappeared too. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I wasn't rehearsing explanations. I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring. I pulled into my apartment complex, locked my door, and checked my bank balance out of habit. Everything was exactly where it should be. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't defensive. I was free. Family helps family. But some people aren't family. They're just related to you. And sometimes the healthiest choice you can make is to stop paying the price for someone else's refusal to change.